Let's listen to 3 sounds of the bell. Let's sing a song together. If you know this song, please join in. If you don't, you can use your arms, your hands. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that either. It's an invitation. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I am blooming as a flower. I am fresh as the dew. I am solid as a mountain. I am firm as the earth. I am free. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. I am water reflecting what is real, what is true. And I feel there is space deep inside of me. I am free, I am free, I am free. That's another one of those practice songs that you can use as a guide for practicing. It's a song that's about nourishing ourselves, helping us to be in touch with qualities that help us to feel fresh, solid, spacious, right? To remember that we have those capacities. So we sing and we breathe and we take on the meaning of the words, experience the meaning of the words, and water the seeds of freshness, of solidity in us, of stillness, like water that can reflect, the spaciousness between things. We are that too. Actually, we're mostly space, aren't we? When you get down to the little tiny bitty bits of matter, it's mostly space. So I'd like to share a little bit about my practice of conscious breathing and some various things that I've learned along the way and ways in which I've practiced. I think of my practice of breathing sometimes as a threshold, and we talked about that last night, how it's something that helps us cross into an awareness of the present moment. It's like a doorway, a threshold that we can go through into that awareness. The idea is not to be conscious, just only be conscious of our breathing. It's to go through the door of breathing consciously into an awareness of the present moment. Right? So breath as a threshold. And that kind of practice often carries with it a calming, resting quality. Sometimes we say it's like coming home to ourselves. For a lot of different ways of describing it. It's a very important part of our practice. In Sanskrit, there's a word, well, it's the English version of Sanskrit, shamatha, S-H-A-M-A-T-H-A, shamatha. And shamatha means stopping the running, stopping the just going on in habit energy. Just running. What's next? Right? And breath as threshold is a kind of practice that helps us to do that stopping, to realize it. In our mind, we stop running, coming back to the awareness of breath in the body. Now I'm not running out there, now I'm here, aware of my body. Mind is coming home. I feel the experience of breathing, so there's not a swirling or a push and a pull in the heart space. Instead, it's an opening and a releasing. Right? We really come home to the present moment. I use words that connect me with this practice. So I often don't just say breathing in, I'm aware of that I'm breathing in, right? That this is in breath. I will describe it to myself. And one of the ones that I use a lot for in breath is gathering. Because for me there's a kind of gathering in that happens with an in breath. I mean, that's happening with the activity of the breath in the body, and that we're drawing air into the space of the body, right? There's the gathering, but there's also the gathering of awareness into this space, and that's what I'm doing. So I often will say, instead of breathing in, I will say gathering in, to help me be aware of that gesture, that movement in the breath. And in life too, things coming together, things integrating. And then with the out breath, I often will say something like settling or settling down, or relaxing or releasing, right? Because that's also happening with the physical gesture of the breath, but there is a mirror of that inwardly for me as the tension or stress or worry falls away. So I use those words instead of saying breathing in, breathing out. I often say gathering in, settling down. It's very similar to the poem for walking. I have arrived at home. Arrive at home. Same kind of quality. Sometimes because of the busyness that we've had, or the state of our mind being dispersed and distracted, it's not so easy to find our breath. And it can be helpful to stretch or move a little in the body to accent that space, to make it clear what's going on. Something as simple as like stretching your arms over your head, and then as you let out, right, you have opened this whole space in the chest and trunk of the body, just stretched it out, and now be able to feel the breath more. Yeah, it becomes more apparent, easier to get in touch with, and it doesn't have the the lethargy or the heaviness that it might have had a moment before, right? And you can stretch out the body a number of ways, a number of times for a few breaths like that. If you're wanting to really settle into conscious breathing practice, you might just not want to just sit down and do that, but actually stretch a little first, get the circulation happening. And our breath has a certain knowledge, wisdom in it, which we often don't allow. We stop it, we inhibit it with our attention and with our control. Many of us, we have practiced pranayams or some kind of other breathing technique in yoga or another tradition, right? Where we control the breath, we make it do a certain thing. And then when we do that enough, we get used to it, and it seems like that's natural, but actually it's not. It's us controlling the breath, and there is something to letting the breath breathe itself. I started with controlling the breath practices a lot. That's where I was before I came into Plum Village practice and the Zen style sitting. And in this practice, we often say, follow your breath. And that means to follow the breath wherever it wants to go with your awareness. Follow with awareness. Not control it and make it do something. Make it be slow and deep and steady. But follow it where it would like to go. And that's not so easy. It's not so easy. We have a lot of habit energy tied up with the breath. Even if we haven't trained in pranayams or something like that, there's a lot of tightening that happens in breathing. Anytime a strong feeling comes up, if you come back to your breathing, you notice, oh wow, something's really locked up there. Often very high. Often the belly and the lower abdomen get this tightening with strong feelings, and then we're only breathing up here. Very shallow. When the real depth and strength of our breath is when the diaphragm drops and the belly opens, right? And then the full experience of the lungs filling up completely can happen. So finding the breath and following the breath and allowing the breath to breathe itself. These are things I've played a lot with. I did one exercise that, again, it's like stretching the body out to notice first what's going on in the breath and to give it some space and circulation and warmth. But using tension and using control in order to let go of tension and control, which is one way that you can approach this if you really want to let your breath breathe itself. Apply a lot of tension and then let go of your tension and watch and see what happens. One way I do that is like this. I take a deep breath in and I'll fill myself with breath all the way down and open upwards, and then push it all out, emptying the belly, emptying the chest, and emptying the throat. And then you just lock it a little bit in the back of the mouth. And don't try it. This will take too long to explain. Not yet, at least. Maybe we'll do it in a second. And you lock it out. So like you're pushing it out and just close. And then count slowly to 5. So you're not getting any air, right? 1, 2, 3. And when you get to 5, all you have to do is unlock this back of the throat and nasal cavity and just kind of open up. And the breath will go, it'll pull itself in. And all you have to do is watch. You've just created this tension and this need for breath, and you're there. And then you let go and you watch what happens. And then just follow. You want to try it? Okay, take a deep breath in. Belly, chest, all the way up in the throat. Now press out in the belly. Breath out, all the belly, everything out. Push it out, 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 out. And when it's out all the way, just close it off and don't breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then just relax a little bit. Release. And watch. Watch the in, watch it settle, watch it go out, in, out, in, out. Any way it wants to go. Don't control it. You do that a couple of times, it's very interesting how you develop the capacity to sort of let go of the control and trust the breath. Trust that it will breathe just fine by itself. And sometimes it'll almost seem like it's going to stop, and you're like, oh no. Right? Then it will come in. Don't worry. It will draw itself in. Yeah. And there's an insight in there and a movement which is taking place in the body with the breath, that when we are present, our presence, our consciousness of it actually helps it. Right? Helps it to sort of helps it to integrate fully. And our mind is getting this massage, our heart is getting this massage, and our body's getting this massage of breath as it moves in and out, and that stress and tension falls away, and the breath knows just where to go. Like, we may not actually know what's the next layer of tension that needs to peel off. We might be going for the one that's 5 layers down and trying to force our way there. The breath knows just how to peel away the next layer, and the next layer, and the next layer. And my breathing will go through these cycles of where it's like little tiny in, out, and then deeper in, out, and then like yawn. And with that out breath, I really feel like something align and something fall away. It's kind of like getting a chiropractic adjustment, right? It's like that. It's like something happens and falls into place, and then the breath almost disappears into nothingness again. Little tiny in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, and then another yawn. It'll go through these cycles and just peel off the tension for me. It's a kind of clearing that happens on an energetic level, in a physical level, all the way through me. And I'm not doing anything except being there. Right? It's this wonderful thing where there's so much capacity in such little effort. It took me a while to learn how to do that. I had such a tendency to want to make my breath be something special. Right? I would sit in Upper Hamlet. I was sitting in a long row of men. We sat in rows. Like when we did sitting meditation, we'd be in rows like this of cushions going away from the altar like that, and all of us facing out so no one's looking at anyone. And I would often place myself next to one of the older monks that I really liked. He didn't speak any English, and so it was kind of cool, just get like transmission of being there. And I would sit next to him, and I noticed early on in sitting with him that I could hear that his breath was going all over the place. And that started to challenge my idea of the control that I was doing. I was always just trying to go, sit down, and you're a great practitioner, Michael, you can do deep and slow right away. Right? But there was a lot of effort and force in that practice. And it actually accumulates tension through our system when we do that. Yeah, listening to him sort of indicated for me there might be another way to do this, and then I started putting 2 and 2 together, follow the breath, and what I was hearing. I was like, no one would ever hear me breathe. I'm so steady and slow. This is all kind of in the realm of breath as threshold, really coming home to ourselves, coming into the moment. So another way I think of breath is breath as support. And this, there's another little story from that time early on in my monastic life when I was an attendant to Tai. Means I got to hang out with him all day. When you're his attendant, the role is like, oh, you're taking care of the teacher, right? Right? He doesn't need a whole lot. I would make tea, right? And carry his shoulder bag, which he could carry himself, but It basically was this way of allowing the novice monks to have time around the teacher and to train in that and for the teacher to learn about all your little habit energies and things like that. But one day I was attendant to Thai, and two venerable monks from Bangladesh, two older monks from Bangladesh were visiting, and they had an audience with them at that time to ask questions with Thai. And I served them all tea, and then the older monk said, Thai, so in the tradition that I learned practice, when we practice conscious breathing, we just practice breathing, just breath, just in and out, simple, clear. And I've been doing that for decades. But when I'm studying your teaching, you do all kinds of stuff, like breathing in, I have arrived, breathing out, I am home, breathing in and out, aware of all these things. You're doing so much with the breath. And I just would like to understand why is it that I, in my tradition, have such a different orientation towards conscious breathing. And Thai reached down and picked up one of the tea plates, and he held up the tea plate in his hand. And he said, here we go, this is the tea plate. This is your practice of conscious breathing. And then he reached down and he picked up an orange and he put it on the plate. He said, and I can offer you this. You see, your breath can be the vehicle, the means by which you bring your awareness to something else. Something else is a gift because of your breath. And that's what I think of as breath as support. The breath is like a support for helping us to get more deeply in touch with things. Like the idea of being in the body and relaxing the body. Right? Awareness of my body is one thing. Awareness of the body while practicing conscious breathing is another. Conscious breathing keeps me in the present moment in that awareness. It offers me awareness of my body grounded in the experience of being present and not speculating about my body or worrying about my body, but experiencing my body in the moment. Right? Or to, as we did with the breathing in and breathing out song, breathing in, and out, in and out. I'm blooming as a flower. I'm fresh as the dew. I'm solid as a mountain, right? Okay, so I'm going to serve the experience of solidity by using that thought, I am solid as a mountain, and its meaning, right, and then offered to me through the in-breath and the out-breath. Right? So the breath becomes a support for a way of connecting deeply, not just, right, being there. And it's awesome if you just want to count your breath or something like that. It's a very common technique, counting breath. That's wonderful too. Right? And the counting is not the point. The counting is just an anchor for us to be aware of breath. And breath allows us to be present. Right? To cultivate that awareness of presence in the moment. So that's an important part of our practice. And with that established, we then can go further into connecting with various things, different layers of our being, as I talked about last night, with each other, and integrating the practice into the activities of our daily life, with the breath as a ground, right? As a support for all of that. And this is actually in the old teaching of the Buddha too. Anapanasati Sutta, the teachings on conscious breathing that the Buddha offered, they move from simply breathing to the breath offering really deep contemplations into the nature of reality. So it's there. It's like when we become aware of our eyes and what we're seeing, but you do it from a place of breathing in and out. While breathing in and out as a base, I move my awareness also to include my eyes and seeing. Right? And that ground of awareness in the present moment deepens the experience of the connection to what I'm seeing or hearing, smelling or tasting, and so on. And so that's also very closely linked to the idea of breath as support can lead to us into contemplation. And I want to just bring that out also, the kind of breath as contemplation. Because being able to look deeply, to contemplate something with care and intention, and not get lost in just the swirling of our mind, the breath is necessary. Some kind of a ground to present moment awareness is necessary, or the mind will just take off. We all know that. And it goes fast. So having the breath there as a support and actually as an aspect of our contemplation can be very supportive, very helpful. One of the things that we're doing in our practice is we're learning how to think. We might think we know how to think already, but our thinking actually runs itself all over the place. We don't really do it, do we? Or do we? Maybe a little bit? It's possible. It's very possible to be able to be the thinker, to determine with clear and loving intention where your thoughts would go and where they will dwell. They don't just have to run around and drag us behind them. And one of the things we're doing is learning that, learning how to think with intention, to think, I call it thinking beautifully. Thinking in such a way that we move in the direction of a wholesome, beneficial experience, as opposed to one that is unwholesome and grows our experience of suffering. Let's do an example of using the breath as a base for contemplation. So I'd like to invite you into an awareness of your in-breath and out-breath. And you're welcome to close your eyes. There won't be anything exciting to see in the room. Breathing in, I'm aware that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware that I'm breathing out. I feel my breath in. I feel my breath out. Now I will offer some thoughts that expand this experience. As I breathe in and out, I become aware not only of the experience of breathing, but more specifically, the air itself. The air itself moving into my lungs and out of my lungs. And I am aware that as that air moves into my lungs, part of it is absorbed directly into my bloodstream. Air moves into my body, air becomes my blood and circulates immediately, within seconds, throughout my whole body. The air moves into my body with the in-breath, becomes my blood, becomes a life energy within me that sustains me. And I feel the connection that I have with the air, the deep connection as it becomes my very blood, my life energy. Moments before this air entered my body and became my blood, it was the exhalation of friends around me in the room. In the hours before, this air, which is now becoming the blood and the life energy in my body, was whispering through the trees, along the riverbank. As I breathe in and out, I'm aware of the deep connection that I have with the atmosphere of the whole planet. Aware that I breathe in and need the oxygen in the air. And as I breathe out a more carbon-heavy air back into the atmosphere. And I am aware that in the atmosphere there are many millions of living beings, usually green living beings, plants and trees, flowers and algae and wetlands, who love that carbon-rich atmosphere that I exhale, and they take some of that carbon in, and when they have their own version of an exhale, they leave an oxygen-rich air behind. As I breathe in the out-breath of the forest. As I breathe out the in-breath of the forest. Breathing in and out with the forest. Do you notice how your breath changes when you add those kinds of thoughts? For me, it does dramatically. There's a part of the breathing which is like where I'm resting, I'm calming, it's the shamatha, the stopping. And then when I add the thoughts of interbeing, the non-separation, air becoming my blood, air that is also your air, right? That is the air of the atmosphere in the forest, breathing with the forest. The experience of breathing shifts. And instead of just being about calming, resting, collecting myself, it now becomes connecting, integrating, becoming a part of life, and experiencing the non-separation between myself and all of life. And when we experience those things, we are moved. We are moved into what I would call a path of love or a path of compassionate action, because we understand that our own experience, our own health and well-being, our own safety, our own capacity is completely interwoven with the happiness and the suffering of everyone else around us and all the beings around us. And so we can no longer just take care of ourselves. We need to now take care of all of us. And what we do now, the way we will live our life, if we really understand this, is to live in such a way that we are caring for the whole. Through our interbeing nature and exploring that, a path opens for us. A path of compassionate action. When we walk, we can do the same thing. We talked a little bit about this last night, right? And you're walking and you're collecting yourself in the present moment. Breathing in and out, footsteps touching the earth. There's the calming, there's the resting. they're relaxing as we settle in. And then we can open our senses to see where we are, to hear the sounds, to smell and taste and touch the world, right? As we're walking through it, feeling that deep connection and nourishment. And if we bring that contemplation of breathing in and out, I'm aware that my ancestors continuing in me are also breathing in and out. And as I make these steps peacefully, carefully on Mother Earth, they too get to make these steps peacefully, carefully on Mother Earth. And that changes the experience of the walking, just like the contemplation of breathing with the forest will. Right? No longer am I just collecting myself, cooling down my busyness or my agitation. Now I'm getting another kind of nourishment, the deep connection with life, the continuation of my ancestors moving into this moment of time through me, and the healing that's happening. Because now we are all one stream of life, learning that art of peaceful walking. Okay, here we go. See if I can do this. Shamatha, stopping, is one wing of the bird. This is the nourishment of the present moment. And then that other aspect, the other wing of the bird, is this ability to be able to think beautifully, to look deeply, to understand. This is called vipassana. There's a tradition of meditation that's taken the name vipassana. This isn't referring to that tradition, this is referring to what the word means, which is insight or understanding. And it's the nourishment. Here I'll call it interbeing. And this is how Tai would describe meditation. He would say there are two wings on the bird of meditation. One is shamatha, and the other is vipassana. Stopping, calming, resting, getting in touch, experiencing and developing a nourishment of the present moment. And the other is looking deeply, being able to understand, using the eyes of interbeing, non-separation, to open up to another dimension of our reality. So the nourishment of interbeing, vipassana. But as someone in a retreat once pointed out to me, a bird can't fly with just the wings. They need a tail too. So I wondered when I heard that, I was like, oh, right. Why is it that the teaching comes to us like this? And I was thinking about it and realizing that in the transmission of Buddhist practice across the ages, it's been done primarily, pretty much 98% of the time, in temples, in monastic tradition, generation to generation. And in a monastery, your entire life is about realizing the practice. The focus of your life All the conditions are there to support it. Everything is about embodying, engaging in the practice. That's not the case for the rest of us. When you step outside of the monastery, I've done this, and come back into the busyness of lay life. Most of what's going on is not very supportive to the practice. And I thought, that's interesting. Maybe this is the tail of the bird. The manifesting, the engagement, the putting it into practice part. And so for me, that's what I've done. Moving back into the lay world, the tail of the bird now represents what I would say is Shila Karma. And this is combining two words. This word means precept, which in the monastic tradition is mindfulness training. It's the way in which you do things. And karma means action. The popular way we think of karma is like, you've got karma, you've accrued some sort of a thing. Karma actually means action, and it refers both to cause and effect. There's karma of different kinds. So this is how we put into action our practice. And this, for me, I call the nourishment of giving. And that's deeply connected to this and this, right? The three of them work together so the bird can fly, and the bird with its tail knows which direction can go in a certain direction, right? That's putting it into practice. The nourishment of giving, of being alive, of being a part of life. We may think that we have our own life, and we are doing what we want, or we're doing what we're hoping to be able to do what we would like, and all of that. But really, we are a part of the world. And every moment of our life, we are helping to manifest the world. And so I'm often asking myself the question, Michael, what is your gift right now? In this moment, what's the gift that you're offering to life? Because we're always offering something. Right? So that's why I call it the nourishment of giving. And I'm using nourishment here because I'm talking about building up the capacity for being deeply present in our life, for understanding our path of awakening, our capacity to live in an awakened way. And we need to nourish this capacity. We can't just assume that it's there or it will be there when we need it. We need to keep the pond full, right? Let's listen to the sound of the bell, and then we'll take a couple of minutes to stand up and stretch. And then we'll sit back down again and have a little bit more to share. There's a lot going on in our lives. Yeah. Each one of us has things happening close to us, inside us, close to us, in our relationship with family and friends around us, in work life, and so on. And then there's also this awareness that we are growing as modern peoples of situations around the world. which in my opinion, I don't think we're wired for that much information. Maybe after a few hundreds of years of being exposed to it, we would develop that capacity. Not yet. Not yet. Our experience of life is rooted, is made of our planet, its rhythms, its seasons and cycles. That is who and what we are. We call it nature. Right? Nature around us, it is our nature. It's not something separate from us, it's what we are. And yet in our modern life we have constructed together over many generations now a different world. And we'd like to think of that as being real, and it is. But it's not what we really are made of. It's not where we're really from. And the pace of modern society and the complexity of modern society and the amount of information that we are expected to absorb, and this is increasing every day, especially in recent decades, it's not actually helping to connect us to who and what we truly are. We're spiraling out and escalating. And there's a tremendous amount of anxiety in all of us. Even if we make an effort to not participate so much in the speed and complexity of modern life, we are still affected by it. It has become part of our environment, just as what we would call Mother Nature is also a part of our environment, but this is also a part of our environment. It's dangerous, and it moves us. And it moves us today, and then it moves us tomorrow, and then it moves us the next day, and pretty soon we've been moved so far we don't even know where the ground is underneath all that. And we're just spinning in the constructs of our modern society, and we don't ever really touch the true ground of our true selves, our true home, and our planet. It's really important for us to be able to learn to see this, to understand it, and to be able to work in it, to be able to survive in it. And one of the ways that we do that is to nourish. Like I've been talking about, nourish ourselves by slowing down and getting in touch with our true nature. And our true nature as it manifests in the world around us, and our true nature on a spiritual dimension too, where there is no separation. So we're doing a lot of nourishment there. We call that the watering of wholesome seeds. Right? We have a practice of watering wholesome seeds. And it's a selective practice because we are choosing not to practice watering unwholesome seeds. It's just like every moment of your life you are offering something to the world. What is that you're offering? Right? Are you aware of that? Will you choose that? Or will you just run on habit energy? Right? So we are choosing, we are selecting the wholesome seeds in our consciousness, in our life, and in the consciousness and life of the people around us and in the world. We're choosing to water those, to nourish and strengthen those. That's a big part of the practice. Especially because the tendency in most of us is to emphasize the suffering and what's wrong and what's hard, and to pay a lot of attention to that. And because that tendency is so strong, and it's natural that it's strong, right? When we're in danger, when we're threatened, when our safety is threatened, we need to protect ourselves, right? And there's a contraction there. And it's to pay attention to the world, to look out for danger and stress, and to really focus and emphasize that. But when there isn't that danger there, we still have the tendency to do it, to think about, to stew, to tell the stories of suffering over and over again. When we talk to each other and we connect with one another, we want to pour the suffering out. That's what we want to connect about. There's a tendency to lean into that. And if we're not aware of it, right, then we end up watering many unwholesome seeds, seeds of suffering, that is, seeds that lead us to suffer and lead others to suffer. We water those seeds in our consciousness, unawares that we don't have to do that. Right? And so this practice of watering wholesome seeds, it needs some clarity, it needs some determination and some strength. And just like you might organize your week on your calendar, putting all the appointments that keep you busy and maybe even stressed out because there's so much of it, you should organize, put on your calendar nourishment, put in there time, set it aside, time to be able to take care, time to be able to practice shamatha and touching life deeply, time to be able to practice vipassana, looking deeply, understanding deeply, time to be able to offer what you see and what you understand and your presence, to give it, to manifest it in the world. But sometimes the experience of suffering is strong, it's overpowering, and we can't seem to get out of it, which is interesting, that we want to get out of it. I mean, it makes sense, right? Suffering hurts. It's not pleasant, so let's not do it. And so then the idea is like, how can I get rid of the suffering? But when you look deeply into suffering, you find a lot more than suffering inside suffering. So something to learn there. And one of the ways that we practice, which is something that has been learned from thousands of years of Buddhist practitioners, is a way of understanding what's going on inside of us in terms of that suffering, and learning to take care of it in a different way. Learning to understand that the suffering, even though it's unpleasant, even though it's painful, it is also like a kind of compost or soil that provides the nutrient for a new life to grow. And in fact, without the soil and the compost, new life can't grow. And so getting rid of suffering isn't actually the aim here, but learning how to compost it. How to allow it to become the very substance out of which new life, new understanding, new energy can manifest. This board is awesome. It's so big we don't need to erase it. So this diagram represents our consciousness as a whole. And then within it, we're going to talk mainly about two parts. And this part is mind consciousness, which you can also think of as your heart space, because the mind and the heart are really not two separate things. Thinking and feeling are two currents in the same river. And this part is what we call alaya consciousness, which means store. Store consciousness. It's an R. And you might think of this as the unconscious or subconscious space. So the mind and heart space, when you wake up in the morning, this is your realm of perception. Everything goes on here. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't exist. It's still there, right? But it's not part of your waking mind consciousness. It's another aspect of consciousness. And these are not proportionate by any means. This is just an image. So when we are moving through our daily life, there are seeds being watered in our consciousness all the time. And that means that here, what lies in Alaya consciousness, all the possibilities, all the potentials for what might be experienced are there, and they're getting watered. So you walk in the room and you smile at me, and I feel happy because you smiled at me, right? That's in this space. I've met you, you smile at me, that touches a seed of happiness here, which then manifests as a smile in me, right? Shows itself. Before you walked in the room, you didn't see that smile on my face, right? You didn't. I wasn't experiencing that, but it was here in potential form, in seed form. And so when we're talking about seeds, this is what we're talking about: possibilities, potentials. Think of a seed, a little tiny seed, has the potential to grow into an enormous tree, right? But when it's a seed, you don't see the tree. So all through our daily life, things are happening, and seeds in stored consciousness are being watered. And when they're watered and there's sufficient nourishment for them, they manifest here in our waking experience. Now, if I'm feeling very stoic, very solemn, maybe serious about all the horrible things that are going on in my life or in the world, and you smile at me, you might not see it manifest in me as a smile in return. I might just look solemnly back at you. But the seed was still touched. It just wasn't enough to break through the already manifested suffering, which was there. You don't see it, right? So let's talk about that suffering. So things happen in our daily life, things happen that touch the seeds of suffering in us. There are lots of them. Things like as simple as restlessness and discomfort, things like jealousy and anger and hatred, things like sadness and depression, all kinds of seeds that we would say bring us an experience of suffering. And they're all throughout Alaya consciousness. And some of them are stronger and some of them are less strong. It depends on how much they've been watered. And it's not just that they get watered by the world around us, they also get watered by us, and the way we think about them, the way we think about ourselves and other people too. In fact, that's one of the main sources of watering. Well, let's say that a seed of suffering has been touched, and suddenly the hurt in me and the feeling of injustice in me, and like that is just enough, I can't take it anymore, it's not right in me, and boom, I now have in my life a flower of suffering that manifests. If I was fortunate enough to encounter some of you, and you helped me learn how to come back to my breathing and touch the seed of mindfulness in me. And maybe I had been on a retreat and the resonance of that retreat experience of being deeply present is still with me a week or 2 or 3 later, 6 months later, hopefully, right? Then there's already present in me a little bit of awareness. Maybe a lot, but all we need is a little. And because there's a little bit of awareness in me, and then someone says something or I read something that touches the seed of suffering in me and it manifests, because I'm aware, I see that it happens. Right? If I'm not practicing at all in my life and suffering happens, all I do is suffer. That's the only thing that comes up. Right? It dominates, it fills the landscape up. But if I'm also practicing to nourish myself with the nourishment of life in the present moment, to look deeply, to engage in the practice in my daily life in some way, to have nourishment and awareness, then that is also present in me. And because it's there, there's a relationship to the suffering. And if there's a relationship here, then there's a choice. Without mindfulness there, I suffer, and wherever it goes, I go. With mindfulness there, I suffer, and I know that I'm suffering. Because I know that I'm suffering, I have a choice. I can choose now to relate to that suffering in whatever way I would like. The suggested practice is to be very sweet to your suffering, be very kind to your suffering, and sometimes be very clear and strong with your suffering. Because sometimes suffering has some righteousness in it. I know what's best, and I know that person really needs to understand. We need to make them hurt so that they understand how bad the situation is. And it's very important. And then we need to be very clear with that strong suffering. We have to have strong practice energy to meet it and say, hey, I got you. I know it's really important. I know you are so important. And rather than lash out, let's try something different. And so we call on our patience, we call on our breathing, on our mindful walking, we call on our loving kindness, our strength, and our courage to be able to do something different, to be able to choose a wholesome path rather than the path of suffering. And we each breath we bring that energy of practice in from all the wholesome seeds which we've been watering in our consciousness. We bring them together and we wrap it all around this space of suffering in our heart and mind. We embrace it. We take it in our arms. We hold it like it's a little child. And we say, dear suffering, I see you there. I know you're there. I got you. I'm not pushing you away, but I'm also not following wherever you want to go. We're in relationship now. Let's walk together. Tai talks about it like embracing a small child that's crying, and you come with that kind of clarity. You don't know what's wrong. You don't need to know what's wrong. You don't need to figure it out. This is not an activity of thinking. We need some thinking, but it's not like a figure out the problem kind of thing. It's a be present with the problem. Make a space in which it can be there. Now you see the importance of nourishing wholesome seeds, right? Because if you haven't been nourishing wholesome seeds, you don't have this energy. And you won't be able to embrace, you won't be able to make the space in which suffering can rest, or in which suffering can experience being held. So that's why it's so important to take the time, to build the time into our life, to nourish our wholesomeness, our beneficialness, our happiness, our peace, our stability, our mindfulness practice, so that we can really choose not to follow the road of suffering, but instead to follow our practice of loving kindness and understanding and embrace the experience of suffering. I often will wrap my arms around myself to help me in my body remember what I'm doing. I'm really holding my suffering right now. I will talk to myself. I will tell myself a new story. Instead of repeating the agitation and rehearsing the suffering in my mind, I say, oh, Michael, yes, there's a lot going on in here. Let's bring some patience. Let's go outside and hang out with some trees because they don't get so agitated. and I'll do that. I'll go into the forest or lean up against a tree just to remember that there's something more than the suffering. And I build that energy of holding and embracing. Have you ever gone to the cash register and you've gone to pay and your card's declined? Yeah. You don't want to end up in that situation in this sense, right? So we want to build up that energy, build up that resource when we're doing well. Have a little savings so that there's enough there to take care of the suffering when it arises. I will walk, I will hold, I will seek out the support of quiet people or places or something stable, right? You find those conditions to help wrap around this experience of suffering. And treat it like that child that needs support. It's crying, it doesn't feel well. So, okay, you don't feel well. I'm not going to try to change you. I'm not going to try to make you into something different. I'm just going to be there with you. And if I establish that relationship, it's a kind of listening where I then have created a space, and I might even be able to ask my suffering, what is it that you really need? What's going on inside you? What's underneath the surface of all this? And the more you are present and can have those questions and that space to listen, the more you understand where your suffering has come from. All the different seeds of suffering that have come together to manifest like this. And this is very simple, but it's very important. When you have suffering and you can see where it comes from, then you also can see what to do and what not to do to take care of it. Yeah. Because if you know what you've done that's built the suffering and what situations you put yourself in that's built this experience of suffering, then there's clarity. It's up to you to decide now, what can I do and what should I not do in order to transform this experience of suffering in me. The primary cause of suffering is not the world outside of us afflicting us, it's the seed of suffering in our own hearts. The world around us is a secondary cause. These are Buddhist psychological terms. Secondary cause. We would love to be able to point our finger and say, it's your fault, it's this situation, it's my work, it's that politician, it's, right, someone or something outside of us who's to blame. Because then we don't have to actually spend this time with ourselves. But the primary source of suffering is the seed of suffering in our own heart. Put out the fire in the house. Don't chase the arson. If you chase the arson, your house will burn down. Sometimes I will imagine an old, strong tree with roots deep in the soil. We have a lot of beautiful old trees here. And take a few minutes today or tomorrow or this week to look at some, really get the picture of this being of the tree with its branches reaching out and budding and interacting with the cosmos, and also its roots going deep into the soil. And then that image of the tree can be an anchor, like the image of holding the baby. When a strong emotion comes up, okay, there's a strong emotion coming up in me, and I will be like a tree. I will have deep roots in the soil, and I won't just pay attention to all the wind blowing my leaves and twigs and branches around. I'm going to go deep into my trunk, roots, and soil. And that image is like breathing through that image is to take you out of the agitation of the heart-mind space, right? Or really the mind space, and go into the felt experience of being present with and grounding yourself Mm. Belly breathing. We're going to try belly breathing. You put your hand on your belly and you press in a little bit. So when the in-breath happens, there's actually some resistance, right? And that allows you to focus your attention there, your mental attention, right? It's going all over the place with what's wrong and the suffering. Bring it in. Belly breathe. Create this sensation in the belly. As you breathe in, it presses against your hand. As you breathe out, helps you to get that out breath out. And that contraction in the breath because of the suffering is challenged. It's met with a clear determination. I'm not following this path of suffering. I'm coming home. And it brings all the energy out of the branches of the storm, in the branches of the tree that are in the storm, right down to the trunk, into the belly. And establishes that relationship, that caring, loving, clear, strong space. When I practice like this within seconds, just a few breaths, the urgency of my suffering diminishes greatly. I still suffer, I still hurt, but it's not so urgent. And because it's not so urgent, right, I don't feel pushed or pulled so strongly, it becomes something I can be with. I can take the time and hang out a little bit with it. Sometimes in our daily life, the strong emotions are coming up, and it's not the right moment to practice deeply, like embracing strong emotions. We really need to keep our cool. And I will try to take a few breaths to bring that experience down and make a commitment in those breaths to my sufferings. I see there's a lot of suffering here coming up. I'm going to go for a walk with you later. And I make a commitment in myself, and that helps. It helps my suffering feels connected, listened to, acknowledged that that's real. Right? And remember, this is a relationship with the primary cause, which is inside us, so it's us relating to ourselves. And I establish that communication. I say, I see you. I will take care of you. Right now is not the right moment for us to do self-embracing while we're sitting around in the board meeting. I'm just going to breathe in and out and calm us down. Maybe make a note on the paper. Go for a walk, Michael. Exclamation point. Right? Okay. And bring myself back into focus. You don't want to suppress these strong feelings or make them unimportant. Society does enough of that, right? So we want to create a respectful, caring relationship with whatever is coming up inside of us. This is self-compassion practice, something most of us are not very good at. We're really good at extending ourselves to care for others, but when it comes to turning towards our own heart and mind, it's like, oh yeah, that can wait. This other person needs it more. Well, there is a point where that balance shifts. Yeah. So this is what we call embracing strong emotion. And emotion is this, not just this thing that happens in a place in us. It takes over our whole experience. It manifests and stores itself in our body. It is a felt experience, it's a thinking experience, it's a story of suffering. And so we're retelling that story. We're reworking our relationship to the felt experience, the pain. So the pain is not something to get rid of, but pain is something which can offer transformation, compost, becoming the rose. Right? We're reworking our understanding of ourselves and learning about ourselves and how to take care of ourselves. It's time for me to stop. And I had hoped to offer a chant to you. about taking refuge in the practice. But I also want us to be able to go for a good walking meditation. What do you think?
How long is the chant?
5 minutes. 5 minutes. Hey, what? We can do both. We can do both. Okay, this is the refuge chant. Incense perfumes the atmosphere, lotus blooms, and the Buddha appears. The world of suffering and discrimination is filled with the light of the rising sun. As the dust of fear and anxiety settle, with open heart, one pointed mind, I turn to the three jewels. The fully enlightened one, beautifully seated, peaceful and smiling, a living source of understanding and compassion. To the Buddha I go for refuge. The loving and know the path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy, and enlightenment, a way of peace. To the Dharma I go for refuge. The loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation. To the Sangha I go for refuge. I am aware that the three gems are within my heart. I vow to realize them, practicing mindful breathing and smiling, looking deeply into things. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering, to cultivate compassion
and loving kindness, to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to offer joy to one person in the morning, to help relieve the grief of one person in the afternoon, living simply and sanely with few possessions, keeping my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worries and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly, so that understanding and compassion will flower, helping living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts.